Hello, and welcome to another episode of the U-Talk Show, where we continue Psych Week with part 3. We continue to dive into the tin of tomato soup that is the human mind, and we ask ourselves why it's important to challenge our biases. Before I hand off to Kyle on this, I'd like to revisit something he said in part 1 of Psych Week about how we see the world, about philosophy as poetry, and about writing out one's thoughts in an attempt to make sense of the world. There is a long literary tradition of this. In the Chinese and Japanese writings, we see the concept of zuihitsu. Most of you would be familiar with the term essay. They're fundamentally similar. The word essay is from the French essayer, which means to attempt. And historically speaking, when we refer to essays, we aren't trying to answer a question. We're not trying to make an argument. We are trying to organize our thoughts using the structure of writing to create our own arguments and counter-arguments, in effect, having a conversation with ourselves on paper that allows us to find the truth. So I guess what I was getting at there is that Kyle is just another addition to a long tradition of screaming logic and reason at a piece of paper in the hopes that we can clarify our minds and challenge our biases and learn.
Well, I was kind of with different words. I was kind of thinking the same thing about my philosophical pieces.
So, yeah, we
Yeah.
know that we are challenging our biases, or at least attempting to. But the question is here why it's important, especially given that the brain meat does not always want what is good for the brain meat.
Yes, actually, kind of on that, because basically I lately between houses and that, and so lately my brain meat hasn't been wanting to do anything that I really need to get to. And yours might, in a similar way, yours, our viewers might have the same thing when it comes to certain things to do with, political concepts. And maybe you watched our episode where we talked about identity politics. Actually, no, we haven't done that yet.
No.
No, wait. You watched our episode, sorry, about political
Tribalism.
what was it called?
Yes.
No, it's the one where we defined the actual aspects of politics.
Right, policy, yeah.
No, not policy.
The five aspects, yeah.
The 5 fundamental forces of politics. That was it. Yeah, so maybe you watch that and you're just like, what are you talking about? Politics is left and right, I mean, first off, boy,
treat your ADHD and practice self-care.
Yes. But trying. But yeah, so essentially, this is the reason why, say for that theoretical example, you should re-examine something like that. Well, there are several reasons. First, we grow and learn when we examine our biases. Even if we examine our biases to have been, or we conclude our own biases were true to begin with, but in examining them, we learn about other people's biases, we learn about other worldviews, and we find a new perspective. And that helps us to empathize with other people. It helps us to understand them. It helps us to speak to them in a manner in which it would be more conducive to them actually helping them to learn and grow as well.
I have one for this.
I do too, actually. Can I do my one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially, I once got in with the One Nation crowd, basically because my mother did. And at the time I was still thoroughly in camp. She is right about everything.
Please explain.
Yeah, I will. So essentially,
I don't like it.
Yes, she. Yeah, okay. I'm not gonna go with that thought. I'm gonna bring it back. That way, this episode is a reasonable length of time. So, essentially, in learning and understanding them, because I didn't quite agree with them, but I thought, well, I'm stupid. I'm young and stupid, therefore, I should kind of just listen to them and
maybe they know something you don't.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but even though I eventually concluded they're pretty much wrong about a lot of things. Not like they're wrong as people or they're bad people even, because a lot of One Nation people have realized that their issues aren't really all that much about race. It seems weird. It's not really as all that much about race. It's more their life is getting worse, and then along comes someone like Pauline Hanson who's got a simple answer. And they're like, oh, a simple answer that, something that's solvable. Because for the average person, solving the flaws of an economic system or a system of government, that's all like we talked about what our system, like, should we restructure our economy? On this show, we've talked about um uh do we like tweaking our system of government, changing certain things, getting money out of politics? Those are all like a lot more complicated than the simple answer of, well, it's the immigrants' fault. They're taking our jobs. That's why that stuff is so
No, it's the
so
immigrants who are wrong.
yeah. It's so that's the thing. I can understand that the reason why they're sort of more susceptible to that, why it sort of makes sense to them, is because it's a more simple answer. It's something they can wrap their head around. And so what I've learned is that they can, essentially, if you just kind of not dumb it down, but make each part of it simple, you can talk to those people and you can actually get them on side. It takes a while. Like it takes a length of time that, some people would consider um too lengthy, but me, I'm stubborn, so I don't. Um, but you can get them on side. I mentioned in a previous episode that I got my uncle to talk about politics. And he really doesn't like talking about politics most of the time, but I got him because I kind of I kind of listened to him and then, sort of got him talking. And I sort of made sure he understood that I wasn't going to talk about the crap side of politics, the useless stuff. And instead, I was going to talk more about the things that actually matter. Have you cut out, or are you just
No,
standing?
no,
No,
I'm
you're
just
just
paying
standing still.
attention.
Okay. Yeah, because you were standing very still or sitting very still for a moment there. But yeah, so essentially, we grow and we learn as, in of ourselves and in relation to other people. We find the answers to questions that we want. I found the answers, I eventually did find the answers to the question of, well, sort of how the world works and all that,
Yeah.
and whether or not these people that, my mum thought were brilliant were, whether or not they were actually right about anything. And even though the
Mm.
answer was no, I did still learn a lot about them, and I got a really interesting perspective. I was once talking to someone about that. Essentially they hadn't had the same experience, and they kind of refused to believe that all One Nation voters weren't racist.
Mm.
And like, the argument I made to her is, well, in spending time with them, most of what they talked about was essentially how their lives are getting worse, how things are, and she couldn't quite understand that. She couldn't wrap her head around it. And, what she needed to do was re-examine her biases. Um, and finally, the last thing I'd like to say, while simultaneously not taking up the whole episode with me talking, because we only got about 4 minutes left, is that the third reason is that we can be exploited through our biases. If we don't re-examine them, then that is an exploitation, a weakness that people who are much more nefarious, than we can imagine, can take advantage of. People like Pauline Hanson, people like, Clive Palmer, people like, many members of the Liberal Party, that, they
No, no,
can
no, no, no,
blame.
no, 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 no.
You tell me Peter Dutton didn't try and take advantage of biases when he blamed African gangs for exploiting what NDIS of all things? I mean,
Yes, I am
it was a
trying to
very
tell you
ill
that.
thought through.
I'm trying to tell you that Peter Dutton, the potato in chief, has not a single line of logic in his addled brain,
Oh, he
only the
does it.
desire to
Oh, he
become
does it.
more authoritarian.
Oh
He is
yeah,
not
the
trying to
guy's an
exploit
idiot.
people's biases here. He is trying to justify changing the world in a way that he wants.
Oh no,
That
I
is
think he
specifically that
is.
he wants to create a more authoritarian state.
I
And
agree
by
with you there.
introducing the idea of the dangerous other, he
Yeah, yeah, but
can garner
that
popular support.
But that is exploiting people's biases, though, by introducing that exploits innate tribalism. And so
No, it
essentially
exploits
the
the
other,
innate fear of the unknown. That's
well,
not a
exact,
bias at all.
yeah, but that's part of tribalism, is the innate fear of the unknown, especially when it's uncanny. It looks kind of like us, but not quite like us. And
Okay,
so I argue that he is, and like you're absolutely right. He's trying to create an authoritarian regime. That's what he wants. But he's the way he tried to do it, even though he was ultimately unsuccessful because the guy's a friggin' idiot. Is because like, honestly, if you've ever heard him talk,
don't count
he's an
the idiots
absolute
out,
moron.
Kyle. It's dangerous.
Oh, look, I mean, look, Scott Morrison was an idiot and he's prime minister for 3.5 years. You know, I'm not counting him out by any means, but I will say that it very much, those kinds of people, even though, many of them are idiots themselves, they can exploit biases, or they can at least attempt to. And in the case of, someone like Scott Morrison, very much did in some way. He presented a very curated version of himself to the Australian people and won an election off of that.
We really are meant to be taking this to the next video. Like you've cooked it.
Have I cooked it?
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah. We are sorry, I jumped the gun, didn't I? We were supposed to, because the next
I
video
was
was supposed to
trying to
be.
talk and you ended up just
I'm sorry, it just kept flowing in my mind. Anyway, we don't we you want me to just split it up in post-production?
sure.
We'll
Except
do that. We'll do that.
no. You know what? Fuck it. We'll do this live. Don't split this. But
Okay, we'll just keep going.
the thing I wanted to bring up is that when I was younger, I was a Jehovah's Witness. Uh, Still haven't shaken off some of the beliefs I picked up there. For instance, I have a strong belief that a blood transfusion should be a line of last resort. That is at least, however, defensible because Australia faces consistent shortages of blood for transfusion. And while the blood supply in Australia has been more or less safe for almost my entire life, actually, I think it was my entire life. It was declared safe New Year's Day 1990. So the very first day of 1991, we had like clean blood. Um, it's still one of those things where while not as dangerous as it used to be, a blood transfusion is not inherently risk-free, and there are some safer options which can be used first and which do not drain a limited resource. But I'd be lying if I said that didn't stem from growing up as a Jehovah's Witness and having the no, blood is sacred, taking other people's blood is bad bashed into me. One of the other things I picked up from being a Jehovah's Witness was the importance of understanding other people's beliefs. Because a big part of being a Jehovah's Witness is it's there in the name, it's witnessing, it's proselytizing, it's trying to offer people salvation. What is referred to in that community as the earthly hope. The hope of resurrection in paradise on earth. But in order to be able to speak with people from a wide range of communities, a wide range of existing beliefs, you have to actually understand what it is that they believe and why. And this is a similar kind of exploitation through bias, if you look at it through an unkind lens. Understanding the beliefs that other people have brought with them through their lives is a foot in the door. People are more likely to listen to someone who comes across as sympathetic, who comes across as understanding where they're coming from, than just I'm sorry, I've just got scenes from the Book of Mormon in my head. It's insidious. It's really useful, but it's a skill that I've continued to hone to the best of my knowledge. These days, it's more scientific literature, engineering white papers, legal reviews than it is religion, but it's still really useful. And interestingly enough, some of the answers to the big questions aren't the ones you were brought up with. Sometimes you find that in other faiths, there is a more sensible or a more satisfying approach to problems. I particularly enjoy Judaism's very long tradition of argument about is this text still relevant? What was meant when it was written? Why do we continue to hold this practice? Is it okay to deviate from this practice? It's led to a lot of schisms in the Jewish community, but ultimately they all stem from this foundational idea that arguing makes your own beliefs stronger. It gives them a reason to be, and it allows you to find beliefs that aren't actually very good. Like, we are going to go to biases being exploited, because I don't actually think that individual politicians are the people who make a true art form of exploiting our biases. I think that an individual politician does not have an army of psychologists behind them trying to explain how they can best market themselves. I think that's done by other people, and we'll
That's
go
done
into
by
that.
media machines. Yeah, let's. I'll try not to make the
That's
next
what
episode all about media machines, but
That's sort of what
we'll
I'm
get into
aiming
it
for, though, because
harder.
I do want to discuss that
We'll
that
figure it out. We'll
exploit
figure it out. For
factor.
now, though, we
It's
have run over time
okay.
with this one, but that was very interesting, Horst. I reckon I probably won't even edit that.
Challenge your
Any part of that there.
preconceptions before they challenge you. That is the takeaway from this. If
I'm
you
not
do
quite
not
sure on the
challenge your
meaning of that.
preconceptions, your life will be harder.
Okay, I see. All right. Well, with that, thanks again for watching, everyone. This is a very interesting episode, and
We'll see you all later.
hopefully my constant rambling wasn't too bad. And yeah, have a good one. Take care.
We'll fix it in post with animatics of you being a flying flaming bird. See you
See
later,
you.
y'all.